it is very important to spend time thinking 2 or 3 years ahead. And in these last weeks, we've been spending a significant time thinking about the future because the future is built today. So you need to understand the decisions you're making today because many of them will only have impact in 12 to 24 months.
Welcome to the Connected Shopfloor Podcast, where we explore real stories and big ideas that keep the factory floor buzzing.
In today's episode, we have Rui Cernadas, COO of Adalberto, and we'll be touching his background into consultancy, opening his own startup, and then later on leading many different industrial companies. We will also be discussing the difference between producing small batches and big batches and the impact that samples have on the textile industry. I hope you like this episode. I'm Marco Tschan, and this is the Connected Shopfloor Podcast. I know you've been traveling across several countries recently. How crazy has it been?
Yeah, it's been crazy. I spent a lot of time in Asia earlier this month. And when we look at the evolution that, particularly China, who is leading the development of this region, when we look into the amount of investment that was done in the last, 20, 30 years and how hard they have worked and how much they have developed, not only in the textile business, but across many other industries, automotive, technology. I mean, it's really amazing. I'm not saying it is the perfect place, but I'm saying that we have a lot to learn from them and we should spend, all of us Europeans, more time in Asia to also get inspiration into the future.
What kind of work takes you to places like Asia or Africa? What are you doing there?
I would split it into three big buckets. Sourcing, basically finding alternatives to our existing raw materials. Then also a lot into technology. There are particular segments of our transformation process where the Asian companies and the Chinese particularly are leading. So we've been looking at what's the best in class at this stage and also looking to business and other perspectives because the world, as I said early at the beginning, is not so big. So we need to think more global and we in Europe tend to be too closed, in particularly in Portugal. And there are many opportunities and we are in the big market. And this means that you need to think outside of your box.
And how do you manage to control things back home when you're so far away and production is back in Portugal?
Look, at home, my wife takes care of the family. She's precious in this focus that I need to have in my professional career. But at the company level, which is more relevant for your question, I tend not to do micromanaging. So, the teams are very independent. We have a lot of skilled professionals in Adalberto. And we know what we want. We know our priorities. We know the numbers and the KPIs that we look for. And I would say that it is very important to spend time thinking 2 or 3 years ahead. And in these last weeks, we've been spending a significant time thinking about the future because the future is built today. So you need to understand the decisions you're making today because many of them will only have impact in 12 to 24 months. And this is, sort of the compromise, the combination that you need to do between the day-to-day management and looking into the future.
That's really tough, isn't it? Because you're taking decisions today, which you'll only know in 12 to 14 months. You'll only be also rewarded for that in that period of time. And sometimes you do actually bad decisions and you have numbers going up and you're doing good decisions and numbers going down. So sometimes it's really unfair, right?
There's not a perfect formula for anything in life and definitely not for business. And yes, we need to put things into perspective. So as you mentioned very well, sometimes you might not be performing at the level you want because some of the investments take time to profit. Some of the changes in the team, when you are talking about team members, take time to get the movement within their own space. So yes, you need to focus on the long term to make sure that you're not getting stressed out in the short term. So keeping this long-term perspective is crucial to the well-being of any business leader.
Yeah, and now we know you like to travel a lot in your life as a COO. But what is a normal weekly routine for you? What do you do?
That's a good question. I spend a lot of time with the customer, but I would like to split it into three big groups. The first one is the day-to-day, where I'm spending maybe 30 to 50% of my time, of my energy. So this is, about culture and decision-making principles. And I tend to block some weekly meetings and I have a specific day. So on Wednesdays, I have my full agenda with weekly meetings across different teams with what I call committees. So it's not about only the business leader, it's about the group of people who are influencing the results and the performance every day. These meetings, they have fixed agendas. So we always look at numbers, we always look at the strategic or key initiatives that we are developing within those teams. And of course, we also talk about other problems and other topics such as, mostly about customer growth, claims, a lot about the business and about the customer itself. Then I have the other 50% where I divide mostly into what I would call maybe more complex problems, so cross-functional, more horizontal. Basically, it's a more at the C-level organization and these complex problems. Do we have the right people in the right place? Shall we create groups to do small changes? What key areas we are not being fast enough or we are not performing at the level we are expecting? So this takes a lot of time and it's very important to have a bigger picture on how the company is performing. And then also the business part. As I said, I try to spend a lot of time close to the business. So this means close to the sales team, close to the customers, and of course, looking into the future and trying to make sure that our strategy is being executed.
While doing this podcast, I've been noticing that talking to CEOs more and more is that there's always a huge commercial part of their routine is focused actually on business. And I would think that it would be more on operations and making sure everything is running smoothly. How come that happens?
As the head of operations, you need to spend time making sure that things are operating as they should. But it is very important as a C-level executive, as one part of the management of the company, one big important part. You need to understand, you need to be in close contact with the customer and with the market, because you have a lot of insights and a lot of information about their own business. And this is relevant because we need to learn about our customers' business so that we can improve our own business and our own service, our own operations. And at the right time, we all need to sell in the company. We are all sellers. We are all part of the sales team. My interest is to see the best result in the overall performance of the company. To sell is also very important. And so, yes, also maybe for my personal experience in the past, but mostly because I think that it is critical for a COO who is, taking care of the strategy on the day-to-day, taking care of the day-to-day and thinking in the future. All of this circle ends up in the customer. So if you're not talking with the customer, it's not working. And, to this point, I've been pushing more and more of my team members to do this, to be part of these meetings with customers, because many times these partners of ours, they came to the company and I want them to be part of the meeting. I want them to understand their concerns. I want them to understand how they think about their own business, because this is also part of the culture, to make sure that we never forget. It's not about each part of the company, it's about the customer in the end.
But as you know this way better than me, it's like they're two different worlds, right? Sales want to sell whatever. They just want to get that deal inside. And production wants to produce standard things that they control. They are not unreliable. So normally it's a lot of meetings are around this type of discussions. We should not have that project because it's hurting us a lot and so forth. How do you manage that if it's a more sales-driven organization?
Most of the problems we have in the company, they are recurrent. They are because teams taking care of the day-to-day are lost in the fog, are lost in the noise, particularly in businesses where you are working make to order. And I've worked in different industries that, work in make to order. So this brings a lot of instability into the operation team. We lose sense of the importance of things. So it is, once again, important to be away from the day-to-day, be away from the noise, to focus and not to lose this long-term perspective. In the end of the day, most of the success of the company comes from the operation team. It's not only about sales. Sales can open the door, sales can create a relationship, sales can create the opportunity. But in the end of the day, it's the consistency on the delivery, it's the consistency on the performance that drives the business forward, both from the cost efficiency point of view, which is very important in the operations team, but also because the operations team needs to understand how they need to reorganize and operate in order to serve the customer at the highest level, at the excellence level. There's no other way. Competition is very strong. Global economics are not well. European economics are not well. So we need to be very aware of where we are in the whole chain. And once again, of course, if I'm talking about the shop floor operator, this is very hard to achieve. But if I'm talking with, people from planning or from the quality team, for them to understand, because their decisions on the day-to-day, the way they fix and they see the problems on the day-to-day, makes a big difference in the long term. So yes, operations and sales need to be strictly connected, and people in the operations team need to be as connected as possible to the customer.
You touched there on the whole global aspect and Europe and Asian and competitiveness. We will go back to that. But before doing so, tell me just something. What's the thing that you do on a daily basis that you enjoy the most? From all these different tasks that you were describing, which one is the one that gives you the most joy? I'm going to do that today. Wow, that's fun.
I love spending time in the shop floor, Marco. I really do. I think that it's an endless source of opportunities. As a C-level executive, you are also a symbol of the company. So, and we must not forget that. All of the small things, all of the small behaviors, all of the questions are relevant for the other part. So you need to give a lot. I spend my time surrounded with people. Sometimes it's exhausting. There's no other way to make it. So when I'm in the shop floor, I'm passing this intensity, this focus, this mindset, this culture. I like to understand the problems, and I like them to understand the way we need to think, the way I think. I can give you a very big example. It happened the last week, and I was with that customer yesterday. We were doing a very technical production to a very high level customer, and we had an issue with a pump. Pumping ink, the ink was not visible in the moment it was applied in the fabric, and it was only visible a few hours later in another equipment, in another part of the process. But we've been doing this for 60 years in the company, and we have the best technicians in this production order, because it was very important for us. But still, things didn't go well. And so, despite all of the cost in replenishing the order, all of the impact that was in the customer, I had only two goals. The first one was, of course, what we will do and how fast can we replenish the order. And the second thing is, why did it happen? Why did it happen? Because my question was, is this the first time it happened? And, the answer is always the same. No. It happened many times before. So there was an issue with the sensor because the protective coating of the sensor was damaged, and everybody was, talking about maintenance and about the fact that maintenance was not redoing the coating, and then other part of the team was saying, no, but they did it not so long ago, so this is not a problem. All of that noise ended, and we finished this meeting, and I took the most experienced operator, the team leader, and I said, let's go and show me this sensor. And we saw that the issue in the coating was always in the same part of the sensor. We saw many different sensors, and some of them were scratched, some of them the coating was open, and so therefore the sensor could not measure that the ink was basically not there. And we saw that when I said, look, where is this sensor placed? And we went to the machine, and we saw that all of the damages are in the same position that are the fixation of the sensors in that specific part. So the problem is not the maintenance. The problem is not the coating. The problem is not the sensor. The problem is the fixation. All of the sensors are damaged in the same place. And teams are responsible by improving their own work, by improving their own results. And I need to pass this message to the team. It's not only about the other teams. We need to understand the causes, and we are responsible by the output. So the fault is not the sensor, the fault is not the maintenance team, the fault is the production team, because it's their responsibility to improve their own work. And this is something that, as I said also earlier, all of the problems, they are recurrent, so they are very easy to fix. But the mindset is just to fix it for now, never to really stop, prioritize and say, these things happen too often, or this problem causes too much of a problem because I'm not able to identify it immediately. And so We need to create this sort of culture, this sort of mindset. And once again, the small things are causing the big problems. Sometimes we have a big machine breakdown that creates a big constraint into planning, and a lot of orders are delayed. Of course, this will happen, and we have, of course, solutions to improve that. But most of the problems, they are small, and so the solutions are also very easy to implement. And so for me, the shop floor is an endless source of opportunities, and I like to be, where the value is added, where the transformation is happening. And I like to understand. I like to know about the technology. So it's very important to be technical, even if you are a big leader in the company. It's important that people knows that you are worried, that you try to understand, because in the end, you need to make the right questions. So if you are not there, you're not being able to fix these root cause problems. That in the end of the day is all that matters.
It's so funny how I asked you, what's the thing that you enjoy the most? And you ended up describing a huge problem that happened on your factory. So it comes up to solving problems and getting that win under your belt. That seems to be the one that you enjoy the most. But on the other side of the coin, what are the tasks that you would happily take off your plate?
Look, that's a good question. Um, there are two things. The first thing is, as a C-level executive, you of course have also some governance and some obligations that you need to do, and this is something that takes some time, and it's not value added. I'm not in the shop floor. I'm not with the team. I'm not thinking in the future, but it's part of this responsibility. It takes time, and I need to count on it. The second thing that really, it's a more personal thing. I am very focused when I'm doing something, and those interruptions. It's just 1 minute. It's just 2 minutes. You have 5 minutes. This lack of planning and this lack of organization from the teams really create a lot of stress when you have your time very well organized and very well scheduled. So I think that maybe this is a message for the other layers of the organizations. It is very important to be organized and to plan these interventions with the top layers of the organization. And so for me, it's all about planning, setting up a meeting that I don't want to be rushed, because if I'm going deep into a subject, I want to learn about it. But yes, these small interruptions on the day-to-day, which is, I would say, maybe part of the culture also, is something that really annoys me, and that takes me out of my focus.
By now, you have talked so much about improving recurring problems. And I think that's a little bit the way you started your career, right? You started in consulting. You actually helped grow a big consulting company here in Portugal quite a bit. And then you moved into entrepreneurship with Vinium. And then later on to industrial leadership roles at Strikers, Rodi, and now at Adalberto. But tell me something, why would you leave such a safe space in consulting for the uncertain challenge in entrepreneurship?
We all have a different inner drive. And for me, I've always felt comfortable with instability, and I lead very well with risk. And I have a huge respect for consultants. It is an incredibly demanding work and profession, but I like to solve big problems. I like to solve complex problems, and many times consultants, they jump into a small problem, they fix it very well, they are very skilled, they have cross sector experience, but I like, complex problems. And I had this internal will to learn and to disrupt, find something to be better than others, not on the competition side of it, but out of my mindset. So I was maybe too young to be a COO back then. And so the opportunity came to create a company, and I just jumped into it. It was the right moment, and I wanted this autonomy, I wanted this challenge, and I wanted to do big things. I wanted to learn faster, and there's nothing more exciting at the professional scale than to be an entrepreneur. And so basically, it was why I took this decision.
And was it fun?
It was amazing. It was amazing. Extremely hard, extremely hard. Moments really tough. I learned a lot. And yeah, it was hard, but it was worth every minute.
Now that you're working back into industrial leadership roles, Do you actually hire a lot of consultants to help you?
Yes, every once in a while. I think that consultants are very important to solve specific problems that you have. And they can be operational, they can be technological, they can be both sometimes. And yes, I think that consultants are fundamental to accelerate some parts of the company. So to your point, yes, I've always worked with a lot of external entities, and I think that it's this mix between what we want to do, where are our biggest constraints, where we are not performing so well, can we fix it internally, or shall we find an external solution? And this mix is critical to challenge the teams and to grow.
So, but the thing that I find so interesting is that consultancy is quite different from entrepreneurship. In this case, it was a tech startup that you built and then sold. It was a good outcome in the end. And then industry, pure hardcore industry. So for me, the question is, when you came from that tech world and going back to the industrial world, what was the impact of digital technologies that now help you on your daily work?
It's a good question. The technology part made me able to look into complex problems faster and in a more critical way. I think this is something that I'm very good at, understanding what is the minimum effort path. And definitely to work with UX, UI, to work with databases, to work with cybersecurity made me learn a lot and it took me out of my comfort. So I had to learn quickly, which is something that I love and that, we need to do continuously in our lives. So this really accelerated this training, if you want. And this mix between being critical into looking into the problem and in this consistency way of making things forward and leading with problems on the entrepreneurship side is something that I take to my day to day. And that's why I think I've always been open to difficult projects and to fast growing companies because this instability and this complexity excites me.
Now, thinking about like something that is really fascinating to me, and I love to ask this is how when you moved to Adalberto, how is the first day? Really, actually, literally, the first day that you go inside the company, did you go all founder mode on them and started trying to understand everything? How is that first day?
So we entered the third generation. Jorge Machado, who is the CEO, called me early last year and said, "Rui, I'm coming back to Portugal. I'm taking the company. I'm leading it. Let's do this together." So we started to talk. I studied very, very quickly the competition. I studied very quickly the other good textile companies in Portugal. And so after a few couple of weeks, it was clear that this was sort of once again exciting me. I was doing very well in Rod. It was an amazing company. But going back to one of maybe the last industry where we are definitely better than most of the other European countries at the manufacturing level, not at the brand and the selling part. This one we still need to grow and develop. But at the manufacturing level, the textile industry is one of the very last where we are special in Europe. And at the same time, I felt that it was a different challenge. It was a smaller company than the ones I had previously worked. But we both shared a big vision for the company. We both wanted to take this opportunity, and regardless of all of the instability in this business, once again, we truly believe that there is a huge opportunity. So on the first day, going back again to your question, I knew that we had to do a lot of work, and it's very tough to do these turnarounds. It's very, very tough to do these transformation projects. You always want to move faster. You always want things to happen faster. You always want people to learn faster and to adapt quickly. And yes, it's been sometimes tough, but it's been fulfilling, and I'm learning a lot, having a great time. And then the first day is like today. We need to learn. We need to be curious. We need to understand the problem. We need to understand where are the critical variables. What is our cost structure? Where are we spending money? What is driving our service levels? What are our problems? Where can we grow in terms of business and sales? What are the next level of investments? This is every day in my mind and in the mind of any leader. So to your point, I think the first day was natural curiosity, excitement, and a lot of energy to start moving things forward.
Yeah, but tell me something. You something that it's a huge long discussion in the industry world, in the consultancy world, is whenever you go to a certain industry, people tend to say, my industry is special. It has special needs, special things. So that works on a different industry, but not on mine. And even sometimes sub segments of that industry do that. But you have worked as a consultant all over, but also as a leader, you have worked in three completely different industries: rubber, paper, and now textile. Paper, I'm not sure if actually that was the right segment, but when you started at Adalberto, is it actually the same thing but different markets? Of course, different market needs, special things. But are we playing the same game, or does it actually change quite a bit?
If we think that management is a game, when you change company, you just play against different teams, or if you want to play in a different team. I think that management is not very different. You need to understand the business. Once again, you need to understand the economics of the business. You need to understand your supply chain, your stakeholders, your customers. But in the end of the day, the game is always the same, because it doesn't matter what your business or what is your industry or what is your raw material. In the end of the day, you have to look at this. You have to create a culture, especially in the operations team, to believe and to fix problems and to focus and to believe that we want to improve, that we will improve, and that we need to improve. I've been always lucky and fortunate to work or to have the opportunity to work with fast growing companies. So this changes a little bit things, because you need to spend more time looking into the future than on day to day. So I think I've been very lucky. Some of the companies in Europe and in Portugal don't have this mindset. I think more and more we have a new generation of people like ourselves leading the companies and bringing this movement. But in the end of the day, once again, this is always the same problem, always the same challenge, and always the same goal: to grow, to be economically sustainable, and to have teams with high performance to deliver an excellent service.
Thank you for listening. And let me just quickly thank today's sponsor, Progro, by asking you this. While you're listening to this podcast, do you know what is happening on a factory floor? With Progro, you get real-time insights from your machines as if you're just talking to them. Download the free app and ask, what is happening with my factory? And a tailor-made answer to your production needs will pop up immediately. Also, use our promo code POD1 and you'll get a free IoT device today. We're talking about more from a macro and management perspective, but something that happened on a lunch that we're also under the Connected Shopfloor we were promoting, we had people from different industries. And one of the things that they were discussing, it was from automotive industry that they were discussing with the furniture industry, someone from these two industries. They were talking about their production lines. And they had products that they would produce quite in big quantities, and they had other products they would produce in smaller quantities. Mm-hmm. And they were discussing if they should do that using the same lines or have completely different production lines separated for the different rhythms that the products needed. And in the end, they came up to the same conclusions and coming from two different worlds. How do you see that, for instance, this particular example?
I think that from the principal perspective, we have the flexibility. And in Europe, we need to be very flexible because, short lead times, customization, the nearshoring brings a lot of pressure into smaller quantities and into a fast delivery. I think that if you are talking about flexibility, I think that in most of the industries, you need a different setup. So you need to have more automation, less variability in terms of product requirements to make sure that the setup times are not as high as with more complex products. So yes, I think that you need to have specific lines for smaller batches and for the flexibility that these smaller batches requires. And you need to work with data to understand what SKUs, what products, even going back to the early stage of the product development to make sure that you are, sort of aligning your product development with your, let's say, manufacturing restrictions. And then you also have the big batch where most of the times you get the money from, where you get the efficiency, where you get the occupation, basically, covering your fixed cost and making sure that the scale is bringing some more cost efficiency on top of the, let's say, continuous production. And I think that in these lines, you need to look into stability, into making sure that you don't have downtimes, into making sure that you are optimizing your planning to take the most, especially in industries that require a lot of temperature or a lot of water or a lot of energy. So yes, I think that it makes sense to split flexibility and split high production batches. Sometimes you don't have these two solutions, so you need to work on the flexibility in the big line. So there's always space to improve.
That's awesome because they came up exactly with the same conclusion. It's worth the investment of splitting it in two because you're paying that either way, right? And if you don't measure that payment, that investment that you're doing by losing efficiency, if you don't measure that, you don't know how costly it is. But let me be even more specific, if you allow me. And I'm sorry, I'm deviating a little bit. I know that in the textile industry, samples play a big role when you're trying to win a client, right? You need to do a sample, and samples means setup times. You stop your lines, you need to do a setup time, very small little batch. And sometimes you're actually doing samples of different colors, different sizes. So a lot of setups changing, and you're just trying to win that client. How do you manage samples in order not to hurt your daily big batch, the cow that is actually paying the bills?
It's an excellent question, and it's the question of the egg and the chicken. We need to do investments that are not only in machines and the people. So we need to invest in the customers, and we need to have some sort of intuition. We need to look for that to understand if that customer is growing or has volume, to understand who is on the other side of the customer making these requests. But in the end of the day, Mark, we need to understand that we operate in an ecosystem where even if you do not agree, if your competition is doing something, it takes time for you to change the mindset on the customer. So yes, samples in the textile industry are a big problem, but we cannot push the problem to the business, to the customer. We need to look internally and find solutions, either with small or even bigger investments that need to be done later, to adapt our production with technologies that will make sample development faster and more cost effective. On the other side, after a while, you need to look back into something that for me is very important, which is the rentability of the customer, to understand whether this customer is somehow paying the development cost because we are not charging the real cost. But if he's paying this cost with big orders, and we need to look into this balance, and then we need to work with the customer. Either he understands that we need to change the principles of the business, either charge more for the development or increase prices in the productions, or in the end of the day, it might not be good for you to work with that customer because sometimes the customer also don't want to understand, and you need to be very transparent and very aware of this, and be very straightforward in this explanation and in this communication with the customer.
Going a little bit back to where we were, and once, after that first day, you settle in Adalberto, was one of the next challenges for you to introduce new technologies and digital tools since you have this tech background? How did that work for you?
I think that for me, technology has three key goals. The first one is clearly to anticipate the problem. We need to anticipate the problem. Technology is not only for control. Control is very important, but we need to anticipate the problem and react. Tomorrow is too late. If I'm having a problem right now, I want to correct it in a few hours in the coming shift. We need to connect the technology with the mindset that we want in the team and see that technology is an enabler for this mindset. So, as I said, anticipation is key. And if I want zero defects, if I want zero impact in the customer, if I want to communicate as early as possible that I'm not going to keep up with a specific date or a specific quantity, I need to know this as fast as possible. So anticipation is key, and I keep saying this every day, everywhere. I also mentioned control. Of course, you cannot improve if you're not controlling. That's fundamental, and without automation, look, you cannot do this. And then, of course, you also have the other part, which is speed. Speed is critical. So even if you have all of the human resources in the world, even if you have all of the people in the world, you still need automation to bring speed. You still need digitalization to make sure that we are once again anticipating the problem and working on the solution. So this speed, this automation only comes with this digitalization. And this is valid in so many different parts of an industry, of a factory, that you need to push this into the team. You need to involve them, but you need to connect these solutions with the mindset and the goals that you are setting to the team, because this is a perfect synchronism. So there is no other way for companies except to adopt and to start to think this way and to start to look into technology and digitalization as a tool for the excellence in our service and in our performance.
Let me shake things up a little bit, if that's okay. I would love to move to a short segment, which we call Press and Guess. And the idea is I'll throw out a few questions at you, and the challenge is for you to answer them as fast as you can. Is that okay?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Data or intuition?
Data every time, and intuition for the complex problems, especially with people. But data every time, but intuition also very important as you grow your experience.
Would you rather have perfect planning or flawless execution?
For me, flawless execution comes with planning. So I would prefer a perfect planning.
This is one of my favorite ones. If you could spend a week on any factory floor in the world, where would it be?
Japan.
In Toyota, for instance?
In Toyota could be, yes, in Toyota.
I think us, like we continuous improvement geeks, we would love to see that happening, right?
There's no secrets. It all comes back to simplicity. So definitely in Japan and in a Toyota factory, yes.
Would you prefer faster delivery or zero defects?
Zero defects. If you have zero defects, you will focus on speed and you will take the variability out of the process. So for me, the zero defect is about the mindset.
Coming from the tech world, startup world, perfection is an enemy. And you need to iterate, you need to innovate. And if you're trying to do, you have the 80%, but you want the remaining 20, you spend so much time there that maybe you're not using your time the best way. Does that also translate to a production when you want to have that flexibility that we were talking about before, speed and execution that we were talking about before? Is perfection not a problem?
The context is very important in these tricky questions.
Yeah, I know.
To your point, I think that if you are talking about manufacturing, a defect is a non-quality problem. But if you are talking about technology, the defect might not be keeping up with the rhythm of solutions or of new functions that we want the product to improve. If I'm talking about consistency and about quality, and in my current business, quality for our customers need to be the top priority in terms of the day-to-day team management.
When I think about the teams here, is when you're trying to be like perfect, doing everything perfectly, you tend to be worried about doing mistakes. If you're worried about doing mistakes, you're not failing. If you're not failing, you're not trying. So the whole thing about failing fast, it brings innovation. That's a little bit the rhythm that you want to bring in when you're developing maybe a new product. But when you have something that you're already producing and delivering to customers, quality is, of course, the biggest flag you can have. So how do you balance that mentality inside the company that sometimes you need to be perfect, sometimes you need to be willing to fail in order to learn and innovate?
If we are talking about innovation, if we are talking about creating something new, of course, you need to create a culture where the failure is part of growth. And if you are not moving fast, if you are not, of course, challenging the teams to do something different with, short delivery times, taking them out of their comfort zone, of course, you're not evolving enough. But if I look into, and I can, for example, give you the perspective of my technological business in the past, we were dealing with banks. So for us, there was not enough room for issues with cybersecurity or with the availability of the service. So this foundation of making sure that when you have a Go product, you're not failing was something very important. In industry, if you have a zero defect mindset, you have a mindset where people are trying to continuously take the variability out of the process. And this will bring speed, this will bring standardization, this will bring automation, this will bring faster information with digitalization. So I think that you have these two weights. if we are talking about innovation, and we spend a lot of resources in innovation at Adalberto, we want to push for the error. We want to work at the edge. Sometimes we are selling things that are not fully stable yet. But on the other hand, you need to bring the stability to your recurring customers, especially when they are highly demanding. And for example, for us, when we are talking about high-end brands or luxury brands, product is the difference between being a provider in the long term or maybe not. And if once again you are talking with banks, it's the same thing. There's not a lot of space to error. But yes, you need to have these two engines working in parallel. Not easy sometimes because people working in one and the other most of the time should or need to be the same. But in the end of the day, you need to bring speed into innovation. You need to push for the error, for the failure. But at the end of the day, you also need to bring consistency and you need to bring stability to your product.
AI that improves sustainability or AI that drives efficiency?
Sustainability drives efficiency. So AI for sustainability.
Would you rather lead change or create stability?
Lead change. I like to solve problems, yeah.
Thank you very much for playing along. Let me move a little bit to other areas now that we can now go back and forth again. I know something that we just touched before, and I wanted to deep dive a little bit more on that. I know the textile industry faces huge pressure in terms of sustainability. We're talking about the digital passport, where we have the footprint of each product. What do you think is the biggest challenge right now in order to get there?
So there's definitely a system problem. And the system is not only about the digital system itself, it's also how we will measure, how to make sure that we are getting this data from all of the suppliers. How can we be assured that we are buying products from the right origin, despite all of the solutions to control this, but it comes at a cost and also with time. So I think that we still have some issues, but the most important thing is that the principle is correct. So if we want to allow good chemicals or not nocive or negative chemicals for our body in our clothing, if we want to have a responsible industry that is investing in making sure that the use of resources, particularly water, is reduced, and this means to work not only in Europe, but with companies that are investing and that are doing this effort that comes with a cost also. And if we want to inform the customer about these things, if we want the buying of the product to be more conscious, if we want to give an option to the end customer, then the digital passport is the solution. And I'm not worried if it will take 3 years, 5 years, 8 years to be the perfect solution. We need to start going back into the innovation with maybe a 70 or 80% solution. But we need to make sure that the brands, as the last part of the chain between the customer, have this responsibility to make sure that their suppliers and their value chain is keeping up with their commitments in terms of the information they are putting in this passport. So I think it's definitely a fundamental tool for our industry and to reduce the impact of our industry in the global environmental, let's say, dimension.
But don't we have here a small contradiction? Small, and by small I mean huge. Because I see people are consuming faster and faster, and we have this fast fashion coming up, right, for many years now, not coming up, for many years it has been evolving. And how do you see that tension between growth and sustainability?
Yes, to your point, there are a big part of the world who is not worried at all about responsible production, about making sure that the product they are wearing is no medical issues or has not been harming the world. But I think that at the same time, we have space for a new part of the industry that is different. And I would like, taking your question, to make a parallel with the food industry. So if we look back maybe 20, 30 years ago, we had the explosion of the fast food chains. We had the explosion of the frozen food, of the pre-then food. And that was the trend across the world. And if we look at the way the young people look into food, we see a change in the patterns. And we see that more and more people try to find healthier foods. They learn more about foods. They read more. They try to source fruits and vegetables from local stores. They've been popping up again in the big cities and also out of the big cities. We are actually more healthy now, despite the fact that before, I think that the level of unhealthiness was higher. Now it's coming back again to a healthier level on average. And I truly believe that the textile industry and other industries, also the automotive with the substitution of the fuel-based engines by the electrical engines. So we see that this is a trend that might take longer to come to clothing, because it's not, let's say, the most important thing for most of the people. But I think that we have space for a digital passport, for conscious manufacturers, for companies investing into technologies to reduce the amount of energy and the amount of water to be successful in the future, as long as this information and this awareness comes to the public. So if you have this awareness, you will have a change in the behavior. And I think that there are more and more these sorts of discussions into media, and they are very important to make sure that we are, in the end, as customers, making the right decision.
It's interesting because you used both examples that on one side, it's from the consumer perspective, the consumer should demand sustainable products. But on the other hand, so that's from the fast food side, right? And you feel it more because it's your own body that you're harming. And then from the other side, you touched on another way of doing that, that it's maybe from the company side, where, for instance, you have Tesla bringing up a new type of car, or maybe from the Europe side for regulation, where they imposed now we need to sell cars that are electrical. So everyone should be contributing to the sustainability part, right? But then you also, going back to the beginning of our conversation, you were talking about a little bit the difference between Europe and Asia, because you have been traveling so much there to Asia and Africa and so forth. But now looking more into Asia and the textile world, is it possible really to compete against them when we maybe have higher regulation here and more stricter rules?
I think that the industry has a big challenge looking broadly at the world scale and then moving into Europe. I think that even if not by the responsibility of the actors like Adalberto, we take the responsibility to invest, as I mentioned, significant amount of our resources into innovation. But in the end of the day, manufacturing companies need to spend less water and need to spend less energy. It's not only about requirements of the market or of the brands. It's not only about the fact that these are limited resources. It's from the economical point of view. And yes, in the past, many industries in Asia were damaging the environment, but many of these areas have been pushed by their own governments to create rules and to make sure that the water is treated, to make sure that the smoke from the heated processes is also being controlled. So we are in a much better position than we were before at the world scale. Reduction in resources has to happen.
So you see that we are leveling the playing fields.
We are, especially at the big, if I look into the textile industry chain, into locations where you have a lot of capacity, there is an improvement. Because the government saw that in the past, without regulation, they were harming the people. But going back to your question about Europe and how we can compete with Asia, because that was also your original question. I think that to operate in Europe, you need to focus on service, you need to focus on quality, and of course, definitely innovation. But we also need to continue to invest. We also need to continue to bring AI into this industry. We also need to continue to bring new equipment, new technologies, particularly in the dyeing and whitening process, where you take maybe 80 or 90% of the water consumption on your final garment. What we need to do in Europe is to not to lose our innovation and our responsibility to improve our processes. Just one very quick example, Marco. We just made a big investment into our dye house. So we bought state-of-the-art equipment, and we asked for a simple option that is not new. We are not the first company in the world, but we decided to take this, which is an equipment that is measuring the amount of dye or pigment in the water. So this means that after you dye your fabric, after you put the color into the fabric, you have to wash and take out the excess of dye or pigment. Our previous machines, depending on the color, so if it was a darker color, you would need to do more washes, put more clean water to take the excess of dyeing. And if you had lighter colors, you would need to put less water, but you had to make this fixed into your process receipt or process program. Right now, these new machines, they identify this amount of pigment and they decide, shall I do a new washing or not? So we are taking the responsibility and we are impacting positively sustainability and cost efficiency, bringing technology into the process. So this means that we are using less water. Less water means less energy. And in the end of the day, we are being faster and more cost effective in the production line. So I think that Europe also needs to continuously find these solutions. And we need to focus on service, on product, on creativity, on being close to the customer, understanding that we will not be able to do everything in Europe, but we will continue to have this business in Europe in the coming years.
So you see that digitalization, data, AI, automation, they will actually help us to get to a more sustainable world, right?
They are critical to do it.
I know that you worked in Portugal, in Brazil, in Spain, and now you have all of these leadership roles in different companies. Do you see any different style of the people in these different countries you worked in?
Yes, you have. You have these different contexts. You have the cultural part of it. And of course, if you are moving to regions where there are not so historically manufacturing identity or manufacturing history, it takes more time. You need to spend more time in learning. You need to spend more time in teaching. People will not show up because basically they don't understand that this contract means the responsibility for them to show up. So yes, it's interesting how these different regions mean spending time in different problems. But yet again, the companies exist to fix problems and to solve these problems. So it was very important for me to have all of these experiences that you mentioned in many other countries, in many other continents. In those countries, I lived and spent a lot of time, so it was more intense for me. And to be honest, it also helped me to grow and to maybe develop a little bit my social skills and my intuition with people. And because at the end of the day, you need to work with a local team. There's no other way. Even with all the automation in the world, you still need someone to be operating the factories.
And do you think is there anything from those countries that we can learn in the Portuguese industry that we can bring import from them?
I think that in Europe, we need to be a bit more ambitious, particularly in Portugal. I think that most of the leaders here work very hard, but do not involve their teams enough in the problems. They take the responsibility with themselves, and sometimes it is important to share the problem with the team because then you will divide and take this weight out of you. And this is something that I think in Portugal we do a lot. We take a lot of the problems with ourselves. We think that either because we don't want to share the knowledge or because we think it is expected as leaders to have all the solutions. I think that we need, as individuals, to do this mindset. As we grow in the company, we are more multipliers rather than doers and than fixers. So this is at the individual scale. If I look into the business, into the companies, I see in Portugal amazing groups doing amazing things, but we are still too comfortable. We are still not thinking big enough. We are not hearing and not dedicating time to other geographies, to our competition, to study or to learn. And now you don't need to go to a business school. You have podcasts, you have YouTubes, you have books. There's so many information available and easy to access that we need to believe we can do better. And I think that in Portugal, there is not enough of this energy. There are so many ways to grow a business, and we need business to grow in Portugal. We have too many small companies. We need to look into geographies. Brazil is a good example. Spain is also a good example. Amazing global companies in Spain. And we need to have this energy and this will in Portugal.
I think maybe it's not just in Portugal overall. We should have more fun, right? We should have more fun and not
Yeah,
always be so
and
sad
celebrate and celebrate.
and celebrate. Exactly. Now, it's clear now after all of these questions that you're constantly thinking about how things could be better. But what do you do in order to recharge and come back with a fresh perspective?
It's very important to recharge because life is not easy for everyone, and definitely not for a C-level executive. I'm very respectful of my body, so I dedicate a lot of time to rest and to do some sports. It's very important for me to to block my head from the day-to-day problems and worries. So sports and using my body with the right rhythm is very important. Then, of course, I spend a lot of time with my family. My kids are now 9 and 11, so they are in a wonderful age where I just have a lot of fun with them, and of course with my wife too. So right now it's, I would say, my most fulfilling part of my weekly agenda. So I try to spend as most of the time with them as I can. And also being in touch with the nature. I think that we spend too much time connected into working and into podcasts and into these all of these amazing sources of knowledge and information and solutions. I consume these a lot, but sometimes I also need to stop. I'm not doing it as often as I wanted, but sometimes I need to go to the nature. So this can be the mountain, this can be the ocean. So yeah, I think nature is a very strong and powerful source of energy. I have reduced a little bit the amount of time I spend with my friends, the amount of time I spend, seeing television. But in the end of the day, I spend a lot of time doing also what I want. I love to work. I love my family. And I want to take care of me because I'm not here for the short term.
Exactly. You want to be here on the long run.
Yeah.
But yeah, look into that. If you could, by any chance, go back in time and talk to yourself at the start of the career, but having the experience you have nowadays, what advice would you give to your younger self?
I never look back. I never look back. I have no regrets in my life. I've been very lucky and very fortunate.
I can imagine your wife loves that fact that you have zero regrets. You're never sorry.
No, I'm not. I'm very lucky, particularly with her. I have to be honest. But look, to give you an answer, maybe I would have started my first company earlier. So I would not have spent 8 years working. It was amazing. I learned a lot in Kaizen Institute. When I entered, we were 10 or 15 engineers and I left with 150. It's an amazing learning process. I traveled the world, but I would have started my company earlier. So that's something that maybe I would say to the younger Rui, with 25, 26, with 4, 5, 6 years of experience, just, go and fix big problems.
And now, forgetting about the past, I'm like you. I'm always thinking about the future too. As you brought up, you have two children, Camila and Lucas, 9 and 11. And when you think about imagining them entering the workforce, what kind of world do you think they'll find?
I am very positive about the future. I think that despite all of the nonsense in media, we live in a much better society than before. If you look at the successful birth rate, at the amount of illnesses that we are now able to live with or completely recover from, many of the really important society metrics, if you want, are much better now than they were 20 years ago. And I mean across the globe. We have problems, of course. We have the uncertainty with the tariffs. We have a lot of issues, but they will always exist. So I think that with this automation, with this speed, with this with all of these change happening faster, to be honest, I think that the human relationships will be more important. And for us to be strong in human relationships, we also need to be more confident. We need to learn from a very early stage to work in teams. And so I think that my children, when in 20 years, they will find a better world. They will still be necessary to fix problems. There might be some change. We used to work 50 hours. China used to work 48 hours a week. Now they work 40, like we do in Europe. So maybe some of these rules will change, but in the end of the day, we will still have people dealing with people, solving complex problems, and trying to see what is the next step.
When you look into education systems, universities, are we actually preparing the next generation to proper way?
I think it is very important that schools adapt to today's businesses or today's lifestyle. And this means to work with teams, to be able to identify a problem and to develop curiosity, to develop creativity, to make them fixing problems together, to put children less looking into books and more looking into projects and into tasks. It's definitely something that I think the school at the early stage needs to improve. Once again, I'm very lucky that I am able to provide this type of teaching to my children, but I would like to see this across the public school from a very early stage. Now, if I look more into universities, I think that we need more people with experience teaching at universities. I remember back when I was at the university, the most exciting classes for me were from, industrials, business people, because there's a sort of flow, a sort of energy that you build in the real world and you do not get the university levels. So I think I understand that you still have an academic plan, but more than the academic plan is the real world that we need to prepare students for. And this mix between the real world and the traditional schooling needs to be much more integrated. And so I hope we can see this change very quickly in Europe.
What's next for the textile industry in Europe?
I think nearshoring is a reality. And I think for us to understand the business, we need to understand the customer's business. And when I look to brands, I see that they need to change their cost structure, the way they are selling, and the way they are communicating. So this means that the long lead times from the further away regions, there is a lot of hidden costs into financial investments because you need this cash to be away from the company or into the ocean while it's being transported into the markets. Then you have also the cost of warehousing. You have also the cost of the out of stock orders because you are, selling too much blue and not enough green. So you have no blue, but you have excess stock of green. So I definitely think that brands need to look into their cost structure, not only from the cost of the product point of view and then the margin, but also what is after the cost of the product, and look into their supply chains and see nearshoring as a big opportunity to drive financial efficiency, to drive a more customized product to the market, and also with, as you mentioned before, with the digital passport, to start to educate the customer. So I think as the business of the brands, or as the brands will become more professional in their cost efficiency, they will also learn that their selling drivers will change. So right now, the retail physical store is still very important, but maybe not so important as it was before, because people buy much more online and you have much more inputs from the digital platforms that are also taking your customers outside of your stores, and meaning that we will see, or I believe we will see, a lot of new brands in the coming years that will grow very quickly and that will not have the same paradigms as the old fashion brands. And these new brands will also want to find different solutions, different partners. And I think that the textile industry will be more in control of the product development rather than what it has been in the past years. This is already changing, but we will see more of this in the future. I also think that we will continue to push for innovation and new technologies that will drive efficiency into Europe. We will have to continuously to find and to source for solutions that comply with the ethical standards of each company. So I think we are living exciting times, to be honest. Very, very, very demanding. We see the reduction in sales. We see the reduction in the margin of the brands. But we also see new customers coming up and new platforms to sell. It is very important also for the European Union to be aware that we have to make sure that products from other regions are paying taxes. This is very important. It's not fair for the local brands when compared with the big platforms importing items. They need to pay taxes, and this will also level up and help the European industry and labor work to be more successful, because we need to have these people operating into successful companies to drive wealth and to drive financial growth. So I think that European Union is also a very important part in this change. But once again, I am very positive about the future and very excited about it. And we at Adalberto are doing many big things, and we have big plans. So we're on our way.
Rui, thank you so much for joining us on the Connected Shopfloor Podcast. And thank you for supporting this cause of sharing knowledge. Really, it was a great episode. Thank you very much.
Marco, thank you.
Join our Connected Shopfloor communities on LinkedIn and Reddit. And subscribe our channels.